I'm Ricardo from the University of Pisa, where I teach fruit tree science, and my research activity since the 90s has concentrated on olive growing. So I've been working on several aspects about this crop, from irrigation to harvesting to the physiology of the tree. Basically, the main message I try to give is that if we understand how the tree works, that means the tree physiology, we can also obtain and use some of the practical implications of that are important for good management in the field. The first thing I'd say, it's important for somebody who's gonna use the product to know a little bit about the raw material. Certainly, olive oil is a food that has health beneficial properties that are mostly due to the polyphenols components and fatty acid composition of the produce. On top of that, you have a large number of volatile compounds that also add to the enjoyability and appeal of the product. Now, all these classes of chemical compounds that are naturally produced within the fruit and then transferred into the oil are somewhat related to genetic basis, like the variety, or environmental conditions, say more humid climates, drier climates, or cultural practices, like time of harvesting, irrigation, plus or less. So if you really want to know about the product characteristics, it'd be good to try to know a little bit about where it comes from. We're talking of a fat that is probably as healthy as we can have among the fats, both animal and plant fats, plant-derived fats. The reason lies mainly in having high content in monounsaturated fats, like the fatty acid, the oleic acid, and then again to the phenolic fraction. Phenolics includes a number of compounds that have many beneficial properties. They work as antioxidants, and that means that they protect our cells against oxidative stress. The same role is played inside the oil itself, so that having a high polyphenol concentration in the oil means long shelf life. And finally, the polyphenols are also perceived from our senses, like they add the bitterness and the pungency. Some of them, because we're talking of a class of compounds that lists over 100 of these, and so you can recognize them as well. Now, talking about sustainability, we really have to look at it as a very general concept today, because fair enough, I guess most consumers know that, olive trees are resistant to drought, they're resistant to high temperature, so they're compatible with agriculture under harsh conditions, and other crops can't do that. But when we use and consume food that is healthy for ourselves, that also means that we are less prone to risks of some diseases. In other words, today, even medical research is emphasizing more and more that before we cure, we should try to prevent a number of health problems that are today really common in advanced societies. To mention cardiovascular diseases or obesity, things that are well known and that really affect, say, the Western world population. In the general picture, we're still talking about a fat, extra virgin olive oil, that hardly hits the 4% of the total fats that are produced and used in the world. So we're talking about a little share. However, the consumption is increasing for the reasons that I mentioned before, and the role that is going to be played by this product has really a very interesting future, because there are many more countries that are starting using it. As for cooking, olive oil is not just a fat that you use it raw on fresh produce, but it's also very beneficial because it has a high smoking point. So even when you fry, the decomposition into byproducts that are eventually dangerous for our health takes place much later, at a higher, after a longer period of time. So there are a number of good points about this fat, and I think the future is going to be good. It'll take a while. One of the challenges is that, of course, this is a fat that is more expensive than average fats that are available in the stores and supermarkets. But at the same time, one of the challenges that the industry has is to produce olive oil, extra virgin olive oil, that has good quality at reasonable prices, and that can be done. For example, trying to use variety that have good productivity, good drought resistance, and at the same time also high phenolic content or high oleic acid content in their fruit and then eventually in the oil. So there are ways that we can improve the productivity. Keep in mind that today, since this is a crop mainly grown in the Mediterranean area, we still have a huge problem consisting in farms being too small. In Italy, just to give you an example, the average olive farm is only slightly above 2 acres. And that, of course, is too small to reach economies of scale. So by increasing farm size, by rationalizing some of the cultural practices, you can achieve the goal of good quality at reasonable prices. Say, prices that the middle class can afford, and you don't have to be the elite within a society or the elite within countries. I don't believe that is the way to go. We should promote this product for the middle class and for as many citizens of this world as possible. It's a tree that is resistant to high temperatures, resistant to long periods of drought, somewhat resistant to salinity. I mean, not in absolute terms, but among the fruit trees, is one of the most tolerant. Being a perennial species, it covers the soil all year round. It is an evergreen. So in periods or in areas where you have heavy rains during the fall and winter time, you still have a ground cover that prevents erosion. So as you see, it is a tree that plays multiple roles, not just producing fruits and compared with other species. In Italy and the Mediterranean area, it is often grown on slopes and very calcareous soils where you have very few alternatives. So these are just examples, and it's a species that in a world with rising temperatures will probably colonize even further the already wide area that it covers. We're talking about 11 million hectares in the world. There's good evidence that, producing olive oil at the end of the day results in net carbon absorption. Of course, this is a general figure because, for example, during establishment of the tree, the net gain is negative. But that's because, you need to invest into a lot of inputs at the beginning without having a large canopy yet. But over the years, it's estimated that by the 5th year, you start gaining carbon. That means sequestering carbon. And so that, after a number of years, the net balance becomes positive. And again, since it's an evergreen, it does their job all year round. One of the things that I think is relatively new, and we still have to let the public opinion appreciate that, is that today when we talk about sustainability, it's not just the field level or the milling level, but it's also our health. If I consume products that eventually are healthy, that means that I should develop with less probability potential diseases or number of issues that eventually are costly, not just for the individual, but for the whole medical system. On top of that, I could add that, there's research that has shown that, for example, a certain consumption of olive oil per day, extra virgin olive oil, does prevent the occurrence of cardiovascular diseases. And that is a claim that can be used, and that was assessed by the European Agency for Safety. And I believe that you have some claims on this product here in the United States as well. I've been working with irrigation, first the tolerance to drought stress, and then irrigation to alleviate that since the late 90s. In those years, that was considered not only a novelty, but also something that wasn't really necessary because traditionally, this is a crop that it's grown under rain-fed conditions, so no irrigation. Over the years, we've seen the benefits in terms of yield and also oil quality of irrigating our trees. Much more recently, I'm tackling the effect of high temperatures because by now it's clear-cut that it's not just the duration of dry periods, but also the rise in temperatures that is really posing new challenges. And we don't have enough information right now. Just a simple example. What are the varieties that are more resistant to heat waves? There's hardly any literature on this, maybe 10, 12 papers overall. Since the 60s, some early work was done here by Professor Hartman at UC Davis back in the 60s, but that's, by now, we have to upgrade that and know a lot more. I have a horticultural degree, PhD, from Michigan State University, and I worked with stone fruits, but that was sour cherry, plum, sweet cherry. But when I went back to Italy after my PhD, I was offered a position with the agreement that because in Tuscany the olive industry is as important as the viticultural industry, I had to take care of that. So I accepted that, and since then, so I really started in the early 90s, and it was a sort of imposed, but I've enjoyed it a lot. There's a lot to know. This is one of a few species, at least in Italy, that has really maintained a key role in society besides the productive role and besides agriculture. Let me make an example. You know, in Italy, we used to have about 50% population employed in agriculture after the Second World War, in the 50s. Today, we have 3% of the people. So agriculture is important, but we're talking of a minority of people who are actually involved into that. So wheat prices, even wine prices, or other agricultural commodities, they don't come in general media discussion, is not a subject of debate, is not something. Well, olive trees and olive oil is an exception. And at least in central Italy, I wouldn't say that everybody has a small plot and they make their own oil. But one of the problems of, we have a brand label of certified origin, Toscan olive oil, which is world known. And the managers, they're really concerned that it's estimated that about 40-50% of that product disappears because of self-consumption. So when it's time of harvest, if you go at the gas station, if you go at breakfast at a bar, if you talk among friends, if you, everybody's talking about how much you yielded this year, how you have a good crop, or what's the best meal in the area. So again, it's probably the only example where an agricultural industry becomes everybody's say at certain times of the year. It doesn't happen anymore with any other crop. And another example is that this is really a crop that has more than just the productive function. So that, it protects the soil from erosion, it adds biodiversity, it makes a nice landscape. The problem we have in Europe and Italy is really a serious problem, though, is the abandonment of old olive groves because of terracing, because of slopes, so everything becomes expensive and difficult to manage. And so we see that woodland is getting into those, and that means for some people, that's nature is coming back, but it's not. Those are man-managed environments since maybe 10,000 years ago. So we have to continue to manage them if we want to keep them and keep the benefits that they bring, not just to the growers, but to everybody, because it's prevention of landslides, less flooding, a number of issues. However, the economics are unfavorable, so we need to find ways where we reconcile the environmental role with the productive and the landscape role, and that is not easy these days.